from the College by the Lake, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Local, regional, national, and international guests discussing the issues and topics affecting the way you live are on Forum, the North Idaho College Public Forum, with your host and moderator, political scientist Tony Stewart.
Welcome to today's program. We've been on the air for 22 years, and it's always fascinating to me that from time to time we come up with a topic we have not discussed in all that time, and that is the situation today. We're going to discuss for the first time speakers bureaus in the United States and the process of selecting speakers for colleges and universities and organizations around the country. It's a special art in its own right, and we have certainly a veteran with us. In order to do that, we welcome to Idaho from Beverly Hills, California, Ruth Albom, who is the owner and manager of Ruth Albom Speaker Service. And I want to say about our wonderful guest that she has been a friend of mine for many, many years. As a matter of fact, her organization has provided speakers to this college for almost 24 years. And we have 2 lecture series at this institution, and she has provided speakers to both of those. And each year when we do our symposium, and we have speakers at that, they appear on this program, and so you have seen speakers that she sent for a long time. Our guest has a great diverse background. In addition to this work, she's a very talented musician, and she has also worked in television, and she will share some of that with us as we proceed through the program. But at this time, on behalf of our panel and our staff, I want to give a very warm welcome to our friend Ruth Albom.
Thank you very much. 24 years. I was young once. Right?
You still are
Could
young.
have come as an ingenue. Right?
We're just so delighted you could be with us today.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here. You've made it just wonderful and memorable.
Thank you. And
there aren't many perks to my business, but that's one. To meet nice people like you, Tony, who stay in your life, who become your friend, who you value as a friend, and certainly value professionally. And I thank you.
We thank you. You have been most helpful to us and added to the quality of our lecture series for what next year will be a quarter of a century. We also want to welcome our regular panelist, Janelle Burke, who's an attorney in the state of Idaho, and she is the law clerk to a district judge in the 1st Judicial District of the state of Idaho, and I shall ask Janelle to commence the questioning.
Ruth, it's such a pleasure to have you here. You've sent many wonderful people our way.
Thank you.
To help the audience, viewing audience, understand what it is you do, let's talk a little bit about your background, because I know you've had some wonderful experiences over the years. You are a musician, and you've had some experiences with the media. What kinds of things did you do?
Well, I think what catapulted me easily into this business was I had been a producer with CBS News for many years. And when I left that, and then looked to gainful employment again, living in New York, having a family, deciding to go back into something, it was rather a natural step for me to join an agency such as the one I now have, because instead of programming for CBS News, I was programming for organizations and universities, colleges. And in my experience in the news media, I worked with personalities. I worked with people in an entire spectrum of the arts, so that it was a good background for me then to become a lecture agent. I only worked for that particular company 5 months. Then I moved from New York to California, and that's where I started Ruth Albom Speakers.
And just what is Ruth Albom Speakers?
It's a lecture agency that works the entire country, primarily colleges, universities, organizations, in terms of setting up programs. Now, when I first began, it was possible for an individual to come in and do this primarily alone, quote, alone. It's not possible today. Today, the speaker's business is a big industry. It's an enormous industry. And we have giants in the industry. We have the General Motors that are there. And you have speakers who are exclusive with certain bureaus. And therefore, for a person to come in such as myself and say, I'm going to try to beat the system, is virtually impossible. How do I survive? Well, I've had wonderful people like Tony in my life, and I've had vast experience in it. Plus, I work with other agents, so I can keep it as a viable entity. But it is today a big business with various ramifications that weren't there when I first began, and one has to face that. That's just the way the industry has evolved.
So if I'm going to organize, say, a convention,
Right.
and I want a
At the
particular
Coeur d'Alene
kind,
Hotel resort,
Yes.
right?
in a beautiful spot,
In a beautiful on the lake, right?
then what would I do? Suppose I want a keynote speaker now, and I kind of know what field I want them to be in, but I want a personality who is going to mesh with the particular kinds of delegates that are going to be coming to my convention. What do I do? Do I call you?
Hopefully you call Ruth Albin and you throw away all the other names that you were given to call. And you give me the demographics.
And that's what's important to,
yes.
to you in order to be able to choose a person who's
And no,
going
not to choose, because I don't select it. I give you many ideas. But in order to be able to give you ammunition, so to speak, that you're going to take back to your committee, because presumably you're working with a committee, you have to tell me what the interests are. You have to tell me the makeup of the audience. You have to tell me what you want to derive from this meeting. Is it just going to be humor? Is it just going to be pleasant? Is it just going to be an after-dinner speaker? Or is it going to be someone who's maybe going to give you a motivation? Whatever. And unfortunately, and this is the bane of my existence, you have to tell me your budget because then we start again. Right. I used to feel that I plead such poverty to people. You got to do it for me. You got to do it for me. Well, many do, but that does rule what one is going to have. I find it a very sad factor that in many of the universities that I worked with, we used to do wonderful forums like you're doing here, and all kinds of symposiums and a discourse of ideas, and it was a viable kind of entity. Well, today that's rare. Today they'll select maybe 1 or 2 speakers a year, and that will take their entire budget anyway. And there are not many issues-oriented forums. There still are some. You still get a women's forum. Not as many environmental forums as there used to be, but the celebrity speaker has more or less taken over the universities in terms of they feel they need to have an audience. And the only way they get an audience is if the name is well known.
You and I have talked on a number of occasions about university budgets compared with the
Yes.
small budget we have at this institution. And as you've just, in responding to Janelle's question, and have indicated that if you do a symposium and you do it over, for example, a 5-day period, you're really talking about 5 or maybe 7 or 8 speakers, and so one would have to divide their budget between those speakers. And in doing that, is that one of the reasons for its death, that you can't get any big name for the symposium because of the price they charge, and your budget is consumed and there's not enough money left for the symposium? Would you share with our viewers?
Yes, you're right. I mean, that's a very definite point. You need many people to come. You're not in San Francisco. You're not in Los Angeles. You're not in Boston. You're not. You have to come here, even though the coming here is wonderful. You have to come here.
And it's a long distance.
And it's a long distance for many people, and that is all taken into consideration. I mean, to me, ideally, is when you bring someone on campus, they stay 4 or 5 days, they participate in everything you're doing, they know what you're about, but that's ideal. That just doesn't happen anymore. Doesn't.
And so many organizations, too, if it's in the convention format where they're having to draw a lot of delegates, if they don't get the big name, then they won't get the
You bet. The
attendance.
people at the convention will come home and say, oh, it was dull. But they come home and they say, I saw Ray Bradbury, I saw whatever. Then they've come home and they've heard a celebrity, or there's someone they know and they've identified with, and everyone is pleased. There is a rationale to these enormous fees, and that is that people that come, they're very thrilled to see George Bush. They're very thrilled to see Margaret Thatcher. And they're, quote, worth it. And they don't have to do very much.
Oftentimes it's a speech for
everybody.
And then leave.
Right, you bet.
Well, if one goes into the symposium format, then as we've done here, there's
you have to
an awful
work much harder.
You work harder. It takes a lot more to put together, and
you got to think a little bit.
Intense discussion over a long period of time.
That's right. You're asking for much more than the person that just has an off-the-wall speech, and that's it. Now, that doesn't mean it's not effective. It is. And you'll probably quote it to your family for years that you heard so-and-so. But we are into a celebrity market. I didn't make this market, but that is what it has evolved. And I find every day of my life talking to such qualified people that it's not up to me. I can't do anything. I used to be able to do more when I did more forums and symposiums. But that is the way we are at. Now, maybe that's part of the 90s. Maybe it's going to change. I think I see a trend towards students becoming more interested in politics again. Maybe you see that too. I do. A more of a voice. But, if you talked about how many years I'm in this, I was in this in the time of the anti-Vietnam crusades, and where there was real causes. And students were very fired up on campus over things. No.
I would suspect that during a period like that, when there's such passion over issues by the general population or students, that also many of the leaders and speakers have that same passion, so it's easier to book them because they wanted to get the message out.
You bet, right.
And now it's more monetary in some cases.
Yeah, right. But don't you find it here at the college that students have more interest in national politics and in issues as opposed to, let's say, a few years ago?
Well, I would suggest in a dialogue with you in this way, as we've indicated, this is the end of our 24th year in this format, that one of the maybe unique, it shouldn't be a unique thing from North Idaho College, but certainly in the minority, and that is that through that whole period of time we've had interest from our faculty, our students, and the community. So there hasn't been this change in what we've tried to do, and therefore I think there has been this intense study. And of course we've cataloged much of this in our library, so we have a wealth of information.
Excuse me, do you tell your students in certain classes that they have to attend this, or this is voluntary?
It's a combination. In some classes, particularly our speech classes and English classes, the faculty has been wonderful to making assignments. And oftentimes they will take the entire class. If it's at 10 o'clock and they have a class at 10, the faculty member will take the class to the program. In addition to that, there's a very significant number of individuals both on and off campus that come on a voluntary basis, although it's not an assignment. So both of those ingredients have continued all these years.
Now, I do work with certain schools and certain large universities where the forums are mandatory as part of the syllabus. So that means if you're bringing in X person, then for 3 or 4 months prior to that, one studies the work of that person or becomes very familiar, and then attendance is mandatory. That's just as part of the program. Now that works.
Yes. Janelle Bird.
When you're finding a speaker, what do you look for in terms of what that person has to deliver? That's a talent, of course.
Of course it is.
And some people have a message that they particularly want to get across. Others are very charming in the way they say it. What kinds of factors do you look at overall? What do you think makes a successful speaker?
I think someone who takes it seriously. I think that if it is just someone who says, it's an ad hoc thing for me, and whether I do it or I don't, no. The attitude's got to be different. The attitude has got to be, I have something to say, I have a message, I love the input from an audience, I love the fact that I'm being given this forum, and takes it as an honor, as a consideration, then we're talking differently than someone who just is doing it for the monetary factor. Now, granted, that's part of it. Unfortunately, many speakers will think that what they get for the monetary basis shows what they're worth. And now, that's not true, but that is the way it's come to be in many instances where speakers will refuse doing certain engagements because they don't think that monetary value is there. I have to tell them they're coming to see Tony. They're coming to Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, whatever. But what I look for primarily, obviously, is someone who has something to say. But it isn't just something to say anymore, Janelle. It is much more, I have to look for a celebrity person. I have to look for someone who's very prominent. I have to look to someone who has had national recognition or international recognition.
How does a person get these things?
Well, usually...
is it from their prior experience,
You bet.
and then they become a viable speaker, not the other way around?
That's right. It's not the cart before the horse. They usually have either written prolifically or they are on the media. On the other hand, I'm always amazed. I get these lists from schools every year where they poll as to whom they want to hear. If you would see who was on the list this year, Miss Harding, right? People, I'm looking at this thing, but I mean, but they still wouldn't book it. I mean, but that's on the list, right? But primarily, it's just they always go for name value, and that always comes down to what it is.
Now, we've talked a little bit about what makes a speaker, but can you help us and relate some stories about some wonderful people that you have known who have been speakers and putting together maybe a program here at NIC that's been successful because it was the right mix of speaker with program. And you've done a very good job of that over the years.
Oh, I like to think every forum was good, Tony, right?
Yes,
It
they have
was.
been.
It was. You were wonderful.
You know, if we're talking that he mentioned yesterday about Buckminster Fuller. You know, you've had people here that I hope have given a great deal to the life of the college, and I think very carefully about your programs. I do, and if you're saying to me, is there any particular speaker that through the years I've worked with that continues to be a light in my life? Yes, there is one, and I've mentioned his name. I've had the privilege of being Ray Bradbury's agent for many, many years. This is a man that is not only so prolific and keeps producing not only books and plays and opera and Ray Bradbury Theater and all that goes with it, but there is a mind that never stops. There's an intelligence that is there. There is a kindness that is there. And every time, he just came back from 3 days last week, he said, I got standing ovations every time. Well, he always gets standing ovations, but it still thrills him. Now that's wonderful, and that is a special human being. And when you're with him, you've gotten that feeling that I've been in the presence of somebody very special. That's the key, and who has left something to me that I'm going to remember, that I'm going to write down, that I'm going to know about creativity, that I'm going to know about writing, that I'm going to know about how to maybe conduct my professional life. That's a big lesson.
It seems to me that what we really are looking for in speakers oftentimes is someone to lift us beyond the mundane.
That's right.
We're looking for someone who will open our minds, who will give us a new viewpoint, something a little out of the ordinary. And maybe that's part of the reason the celebrity speaker attracts. But
I think so.
But we want someone who's going to make our experience larger than life, perhaps. How do you look at that particular issue?
Well, you know, there are speakers who, no matter what you tell them about the organization, are going to give that same speech that they gave all year long. I mean, that's just the way it is. What do I look for? I look for someone who's going to understand your organization. If you are a group of women lawyers, they should know more about what you're up against. Granted, as you might ask me for someone like Nina Totenberg, who is obviously visible on National Public Radio, who certainly understands the law, who can communicate the law so well. She is someone you might look up to, as I do, as being able to give me a better understanding of what I'm in, which would be an attorney. It's wonderful to find people like that in your own sphere, but who become the celebrity of that sphere, and that goes with politics, with medicine, with writing, whatever. But I find it it's just very important to me, as I say, that whoever it is that comes to the organization comes with an open hand and an open heart, in that, you know, wants to do what you want them to do, comes to your dinner, comes to your function, wants to be part of what you're about, and even if it's just for the few hours, is interested in that they are there. And if they're not, if they're blasé about it at this point, then maybe they should go elsewhere. But I've been very fortunate in working with some extraordinary people who certainly have given me insight into professions that I would never have known, and who have made me a part of their life, which is a blessing, and which is something I will be eternally grateful for.
Some of our viewers who have not had the experience of working in this arena, either from your perspective or for we who ask for speakers and put programs together, do not realize that you have to have great breadth of interest yourself, because you are booking people not in just one arena.
Should I tell you my secret?
Yes.
The New York Times. You said that a friend of yours found a secret to you, right? Oh, you can't live without the New York Times in my business.
And you do book people from the arts, humanities, politics, economics,
You bet.
whatever.
You bet. But the New York Times is very essential. And the Sunday Times as well, and various periodicals. From my experience in working at CBS News, I learned how to do research quickly. And I always said that if in an afterlife, I'll still be there with a pencil and paper and clipping and underlining, and because that's part of the name of the game. You have to have the interest, obviously, but you have to do research. You have to know who this author is. You have to know what these political problems are. You must be au courant. And that is where the big organization comes in. That makes it so much easier. You're meeting in a big organization. You've got 10, 12, 15 people that are representing various parts of the country. They're coming in with input. They're coming in with ideas. They're coming in with suggestions. They see something, so maybe they are clairvoyant about issues that will come up next year that you should be aware of and who would be right for that. That's where being in a big organization is very helpful. Doing it alone is difficult.
Yes. But also sometimes a large organization, it's harder to get through and process rapidly for the organization that's also wanting someone. I mean, sometimes that can be a slower process. Bigness also has its problems.
Maybe, Tony. It's easier.
I've experienced it both ways. One thing else that I have learned in working with speakers over the years, and I should be out front to say that you have sent just outstanding speakers, but we get speakers that have not come through your organization, and so when you look at the breadth and variety of speakers we've had, one of the experiences is that many speakers are extremely dedicated to whatever your theme is. They want to know what other speakers are covering. They spend many hours preparing their speech, and they do direct it at that particular subject. From time to time, one gets a speaker, as you've indicated earlier, that has been disappointing because they have, I guess, what we call a canned speech, and they want to fit it to every organization. And that is really a problem and can be disappointing. How do you try to screen through that and prevent that from happening for your speakers?
Well, that to me is very serious. If you have a theme and you have people that are coming to hear X, and you make that clear. What I always like is to have you, as the head of the organization that is bringing in this particular person, write a letter to that person and begin to outline what it is you're looking for. Thank you very much, but the focus of our meeting is such and such. So we begin with having it in black and white. And then I do something most agents don't do. I encourage dialogue between speaker and the organization. Most agencies don't do that. They are, quote, protective, and they are the one that you speak to and not the speaker. I don't. I like you to speak to the person. I like you to have an awareness of what that person is about, and he or she in turn knows more about what's going to be happening. And that has worked as the way I can at least try to assure you that when he's come to talk about gardening, he's not going to be talking about metaphysics.
Yeah. There's something else there, too. It's very helpful. You do that, both a letter to them and then talk to them on the phone. But certainly from your perspective, I'm sure it's extremely helpful if the college or the organization is really well organized to where they have an entire printed program which they can send in advance.
Absolutely.
I will give an example. the speaker that you brought here today, actually, the day we're taping this program, Dr. Paul Saltman, when he arrived at the airport, he had read every word of the entire brochure of the program. He even remembered the names of the committee members, and so when he met them, he was able to identify them as a member of the committee. That is a kind of homework that pays off.
You bet. And that's why he was here for the second time.
Janelle Burke.
Right.
Now, I suppose that along with all of the wonderful people that you work with, there are occasionally prima donnas. I would think that arranging schedules and all of that kind of thing would be very difficult at times. What happens? How do you work through those problems? Or are most people who are in that category very understanding?
Janelle, I was once a brunette. I am not anymore. It's very stressful. It is a very stressful industry because you are working with personalities, and things that you think are certain are not. And there are people whose demands are ridiculous, ridiculous. And yet it does not behoove me to tell you that you are ridiculous, right? And so it depends upon how much hand-holding you want to do. And I've had some major disappointments in that regard. On the other hand, we're all human. And when I have someone that will call and cancel with complete disregard for all the people that are coming to this and all the preparations that were made, and I don't think that the cancellation is viable, it's a problem. It's a problem.
Well, we only have a very short time left, I think, and so I want to give you just a little bit of time to say, what is so wonderful about your job? I sense that you really do love doing what you do. And so tell our viewers what it is that keeps you going and why
Tony.
you like it so much.
People like Tony in short sentences. And I mean this, and this I must qualify. We all work, and those that work, and if you are fortunate to work in an environment where you meet truly interesting people, intelligent people, people who are also compassionate and kind, from both ends, from both my clients and from the people that, my speakers, you have then catapulted yourself into a working sphere that is giving you a great deal of pleasure. And that's every day of your life. And that's lucky.
On that note, I have to bring the program to conclusion. On behalf of Janelle Burke and our staff, Ruth Albin, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to have you on the program and have you in our city. And we hope you will come back.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I know you have found this program most interesting and helpful to you, in particular for you who may be looking to have speakers in the future. We hope that you've learned something from this process. And I would invite you to be with us again next week when we'll discuss yet another issue. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
The North Idaho College Public Forum was videotaped live from the studios of Instructional Technology on the campus of North Idaho College for viewing at this more appropriate time. We invite you to join us again next week for another all-new edition of the North Idaho College Public Forum on this public television station.